Imagine, imagine this for a second. You are standing in the middle of a pitch black Florida swamp.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and it is 4 a.m. It is freezing cold. You're holding this 12-gauge shotgun. Your heart is absolutely hammering in your chest. You're terrified, and you're just desperately wondering how on earth you ended up in this exact
I
situation.
mean, that sounds terrifying.
It is. And that feeling of sudden, startling confrontation with the unknown, that realization that you were completely out of your depth, that's exactly what we're exploring today.
Right.
We are taking a deep dive into this really fascinating mixed genre collection called Swimming in Blue Shadows. It's written by J.P. Lindstroth. He's an Oxford-trained social and cultural anthropologist.
Which is a very unique perspective to bring to fiction and poetry.
Exactly. And right off the bat, I want to be clear with you listening. This isn't going to be like your basic book summary. We're on a mission today to really extract the universal truths hidden in these incredibly eclectic stories and poems. I mean, we are going to travel from wild boar hunts in Florida and Mayan ruins in Belize, all the way to Spanish bullfights and the deep emotional heartbreak of an Oxford apartment.
It really is a tremendous collection to unpack,
Hmm.
and it covers so much geographical and emotional ground. The title itself, Swimming in Blue Shadows, it sets the stage perfectly for what we're going to talk about today.
Yeah, what does that title actually mean in this context?
Well, it's a metaphor for the ever-present nearness of death, and more specifically, how incredibly different people face it. Lindstroth is using his anthropological background, along with his own deeply personal experiences, to look at the human condition from, multiple angles. He's essentially giving us this modern cubist view of mortality.
A cubist view. I like that.
Yeah, he's showing us that these blue shadows of mortality, they're always hidden just beneath the surface, yet they are always, always there.
So whether you're prepping for a big meeting, catching up on your reading list, or you're just insanely curious about how human beings handle the unexpected and the absurd, you are going to want to hear this.
Okay, let's unpack this first story because it brings us right back to that freezing swamp at 4 a.m.
The Florida story.
Right. It's called Hog Ties. We're thrown into the bizarre, almost alien world of inland Florida. And when I say alien, I mean the protagonist is a total fish out of water. He's this college student who just came back from Massachusetts, and suddenly he's surrounded by these grizzled, seasoned hunters at a place called Big Jimbo's Ranch.
The sensory details there are amazing.
They blew my mind. They drive these massive vehicles called swamp buggies that are custom fitted with gargantuan tractor tires just so they don't sink into the mud. And the dogs.
Oh, the cur dogs. Yes. They don't just use regular hunting dogs. They use these things called cur dogs, which are like half bloodhound, half pit bull. There's one in the story named Chainsaw.
Which is a great name for a dog like that.
Incredible name. And Chainsaw literally bounds through 4-foot-high, razor-sharp sawgrass like it's absolutely nothing.
The contrast he builds there is incredibly stark, and it's done very deliberately. You have these inland Floridians who are completely, perfectly adapted to this harsh, primal environment. They understand it intuitively.
Right.
And then you have a protagonist who is essentially a modern transplant. He doesn't know how to track an animal. He doesn't know how to read the wind or look for signs in the brush. He's simply placed in the woods by the guides and told to wait in the dark.
And wait, he does. Until he accidentally stumbles upon a group of black boars. You can literally feel his heart pounding through the page. He is absolutely terrified they're going to charge him all at once.
This pure adrenaline.
Yeah, and he manages to shoot a massive black boar. It charges him, he fires again, and the thing drops right at his feet. The adrenaline is completely off the charts. But here is where it gets kind of hilarious, but also
Kind of pathetic.
exactly pathetic. He's killed this massive beast, but he has absolutely no idea what to do next. To clean the animal, he pulls out a tiny little Swiss Army knife.
It's essentially a butter knife.
It's a butter knife. He's trying to gut this huge, tough animal with it. I have to admit, reading that, I've been that guy in other situations, trying to fix a complex car engine with a plastic spork or something. He just ends up getting completely covered in muck.
And exasperating the guides.
Totally exasperating Jeb, the seasoned camp minder who finally just sighs, steps into the massive Bowie knife and does the job right. So why include that embarrassing detail? What is Lindstroth trying to say with the Swiss Army knife?
What's fascinating here is that specific moment with the Swiss Army knife highlights the vast, almost comical disconnect between modern educated man and primal nature.
Robert.
Yeah, this isn't just a story about a clumsy hunting trip. It's really a Greek tragedy in miniature. In the text, The protagonist actually compares his task to Heracles hunting the mythical Erymanthian boar.
Right, but he's no Heracles.
Far from it. Unlike a mythic hero from antiquity, our modern protagonist isn't driven by bravery. He is consumed by fear and trepidation. His search for manhood, this supposed coming-of-age moment in the wild, is fraught with complete ineptitude.
He just got lucky.
Exactly. He only kills the beast through sheer luck and the advantage of modern technology, a powerful shotgun. Not by any innate primal skill or physical prowess. The Swiss Army knife is the perfect symbol of modern man's illusion of preparedness.
The illusion of preparedness.
Yes, we think we have the tools for survival, but when faced with raw, visceral nature, those tools are entirely inadequate.
I love that. And speaking of being completely unprepared for raw nature, let's shift gears from the Florida swamps over to the Belizean jungle.
This one is quite a ride.
It really is. The final short story in the collection is called In Bu Yetel Ja, and it follows a pretty hapless archaeological graduate student on a university big. They are down there searching for evidence of incipient maize agriculture.
Which is really just a very fancy academic way of saying they wanted to find out if the ancient Mayans grew corn in Belize first.
Right, but their grand academic mission is just constantly, relentlessly derailed by the sheer absurdity of the jungle itself.
The jungle in this story acts practically as its own character. It is entirely indifferent, and it is completely overwhelming. Even the title of the story sets the tone. In Buye de Tolja is Yucatecan Mayan for my beans and water.
My beans and water.
It's an idiom that signifies absolute destitution. If you are down to just your beans and water, you have absolutely nothing left. And that suffocating feeling of helplessness just pervades the entire narrative from start to finish.
Helplessness doesn't even begin to cover it. The bugs alone are terrifying. At one point, the normal background sounds of the jungle completely stop. Just dead silence.
Which is usually a terrible sign in the wild.
Exactly. Then, a literal sea of large army ants floods into the excavation pits where they're working. And their solution, the crew literally pours gasoline around the pits, sets it on fire, and jumps inside the ring of fire just to survive the swarm.
It's just casually standing in a ring of fire.
And that's not even the craziest part of the trip. Later, they get rained on by thousands of falling rhinoceros beetles. And then they take a group of local school kids to visit an ancient pyramid at a site called Queno, and the entire group is attacked by a swarm of African killer bees.
Complete chaos.
It is chaos. The archaeologists have to dive under their vehicles to escape. They end up using their own lunch money to buy the badly stung kids ice cream to make them feel better, and the head archaeologist actually reprimands them for wasting the money. It's just nonstop, stressful, bizarre chaos.
It is absolute chaos, but what's masterful is how that chaos builds up to an incredibly jarring shift at the very end of the story.
Yeah, that ending really threw me.
Because throughout the entire narrative, the protagonist is dodging spectacular dangers. Jaguars, killer bees, tarantulas, walls of fire. But the ultimate tragedy of the story doesn't come from the wild, exotic jungle itself.
No, it doesn't.
On the very last day, as two of the graduate students are driving a van packed with priceless artifacts back to the university on a simple white dirt road, a stray Brahman bull just wanders right into their path. They swerve to avoid it, the van rolls into a ditch, and both students die instantly.
It's so sudden when you read it. You're laughing at these crazy, almost comedic Indiana Jones-style jungle adventures, and then boom, it's just over. Why end it that way?
Because that is exactly the point Lindström is making about mortality. For you, the listener, it's really worth reflecting on how quickly the mundane can turn fatal. We spend so much of our energy worrying about the spectacular dangers in life.
The metaphorical killer bees.
Exactly, the killer bees or the jaguars. But death often arrives quietly, in the form of a cow wandering into the road on a sunny afternoon. The jungle and nature at large is completely indifferent to our important academic pursuits, our youth, or our desperate will to survive. It simply doesn't care about the artifacts in the van.
It's wild how nature just doesn't care about our plans at all. And actually, that idea of a brutal, indifferent reality hiding behind our grand ideas leads right into another story in the collection. But this one swaps the Belizean jungle for a bull ring in Madrid.
A very different kind of arena.
Right. The story is Blood into Dust, and it's set in the Plaza de Toros. It's this massive, imposing red brick ring that looks like the Moorish arches of the Alhambra. And the way this story is told feels really different from the others. We're suddenly bouncing between different heads and perspectives. Why did he write it this way?
It's a brilliant structural choice. Lindström approaches this narrative the way Pablo Picasso might approach a painting. It is a cubist narrative.
How does that work in text?
To put it simply, imagine taking a single moment in time, a single event, and shattering it like a mirror. Then you look at that one event through several of those broken pieces of glass all at once. You get distinct, overlapping, and often conflicting angles of the exact same reality.
That makes perfect sense.
In this story, we get 3 distinct perspectives of the same bullfight.
And the first piece of that shattered mirror is from the perspective of Brad, an American observer in the stands who is mostly just trying to impress his date, Alyssa.
Right, the outsider's view.
Yeah. And from up in the stands, the bullfight looks like this solemn, dignified ballet. You have the grand procession of the matadors in their suits of light, these elaborate, glittering outfits in gold red, gold green, and silver blue. You hear the brassy trumpets playing. You hear the massive crowd yelling, "Ole."
It's incredibly romanticized.
Very grand, very aesthetic, and totally sanitized by distance. But then, without warning, the narrative violently drops us into the dark, manure-smelling chute down below.
Yes. What's fascinating here is the severe sensory shift between those 2 perspectives. We move from the bright, romanticized visual of the crowd right into the visceral sensory overload of the bull itself.
The bull's perspective is just heartbreaking to read. I mean, it doesn't know it's part of a grand Spanish tradition. It is just suddenly plunged from absolute darkness into blinding, overwhelming sunlight.
It's completely disoriented.
Totally. It sees these waving things in front of it, the pink and yellow capes, and its instinct is just to hit them to make them go away. But instead of connecting, it feels these agonizing sharp barbs being driven into its back. It tastes the dry dust of the arena. It's confused, it's irritated, and it is quite literally running for its life.
It really reframes the whole spectacle.
It makes you realize that what the crowd up in the stands is calling high art, the animal on the ground is experiencing as sheer terror and pain. Which brings us to the third perspective, the matador.
Exactly. We enter the mind of Rodrigo, the gypsy matador. And Rodrigo views his work entirely as high art. He compares his gait passes to a dancer's movements. He's wearing a sheer light blue and silver suit that reminds him of the Mediterranean Sea.
Very poetic.
But Rodrigo has a fatal flaw, which is hubris. He desperately wants to outdo the other matadors that afternoon to win the favor of the crowd. In his overwhelming desire to completely command the animal, he brings the bull far too close to his own body for a chest pass.
And the bull just hits him like a freight train. It throws him into the air like a rag doll.
Yeah.
The story ends with Rodrigo lying in the dirt, completely numb, staring up at the azure sky as the massive black beast hovers over him.
It's a striking image.
It really forces you to ask yourself, how does stepping into the literal hooves of an animal or into the arrogant mind of an ambitious matador change your perspective on traditions we just casually accept as art or sport?
It completely shatters the illusion of the spectator. When you are forced into the perspective of the suffering, you can no longer just blindly cheer from the stands. And this theme of shattered illusions and profound isolation carries over beautifully into the next section of the book.
Right, where we move away from physical life and death spectacles to look closely at the margins of society.
Let's move over to Cuernavaca, Mexico, in a story called Poor Red Clay.
This one is so incredibly moving. We meet Manuel, who is an old Nahuatl Indian. He lives illegally in the forest in absolute poverty. Every single day, he walks for over an hour, pushing this heavy, rickety wooden cart to the side of a busy highway.
To sell his goods.
Yeah, he sells wildflowers and these little clay effigies of the rain god Chalak that he sculpts by hand. To the cars speeding by, he is essentially invisible. And the most heartbreaking moment in the story is his interaction with the wealthy German woman who pulls up to his cart in a shiny silver Mercedes.
That interaction is so incredibly thick with unsaid tragedy.
It really is.
What Manuel doesn't fully grasp is that this German woman actually employs Manuel's estranged son, Manuelito, as her gardener. Manuelito is deeply embarrassed by his father's extreme poverty and his inability to speak fluent Spanish, so he has completely abandoned him.
Just left him out there.
Exactly. The woman overpays Manuel for the flowers out of a sense of deep pity, trying in her own clumsy way to bridge this massive societal gap. But Manuel can barely understand her Spanish. He just humbly accepts the money with profound gratitude, completely unaware of the full tragic context of her charity.
He is the ultimate marginalized figure. He's treated like a non-person in his own society. But despite that, he finds this quiet, enduring peace. When a massive rainstorm comes, he doesn't curse his luck. He prays to the old rain god Tlaloc and to the Virgin of Guadalupe. He just stands there and watches the rain wash the red clay down the side of the mountain.
That red clay is a powerful central metaphor for the whole story. The rain washes the mud, which then mixes with the clay, which eventually fertilizes the earth to bring more flowers. Exactly, it's a cycle of life renewing itself endlessly, even in the face of immense poverty and social ostracization. Manuel is physically destitute, he has almost nothing, but he maintains a deep spiritual connection to the earth's renewal.
Now, contrast Manuel's physical poverty in Mexico with the severe emotional poverty we see in the next story, which is called To Be Forgotten, set in Oxford in the UK.
A very different kind of poverty.
Entirely. We meet a young academic and his girlfriend, Jo Stein. Jo Stein has suffered horrific childhood abuse. Her mother used to lock her out of the house in the cold for no reason at all. Now, as an adult, she is paralyzed by this trauma. She's unable to finish her PhD. She's prone to these overwhelming waves of grief.
And she's very dependent on her partner.
Entirely dependent on her boyfriend, who is trying so hard but ultimately failing to play the role of a savior.
If we connect this to the bigger picture of the collection, both Manuel and Jo Stein are dealing with profound, crushing isolation. But while Manuel has the mountain and the rain to ground him, Jo Stein has nothing but a small stuffed dog she names Buster, which she clutches to her chest like a literal lifeline.
It's so sad.
And the physical environment in Oxford heavily mirrors her internal emotional decay.
It really does. The omens Lindstrath writes into this story are incredibly dark and gothic. The narrator is visiting an older American academic named Richard, who has this beautiful, expensive flat overlooking the Cherwell River. But Richard's balcony is covered in tiny, crushed bones.
Such a jarring image.
A massive flock of ravens roosts in the chestnut trees above, and they use his pristine balcony as a graveyard for their scavenged meals. It's a disgusting, foreboding image that perfectly foreshadows the tragedy of the young couple's relationship.
It sets the tone perfectly.
The despair ultimately culminates in an unwanted pregnancy, and Jo Stein taking an abortion pill in a state of absolute emotional numbness. The relationship just completely disintegrates into a limbo of sorrow.
It's a very heavy story. But it illustrates that whether you are an indigenous man abandoned by your children on a dusty Mexican highway, or you are a brilliant student in the halls of Oxford paralyzed by your past, the human struggle for connection remains universally fraught. Everyone is trying to push through their own specific type of isolation.
Which actually brings us to the final section of the book, the poetry. There are 10 poems in this collection, and they act almost as a macro-level reflection of all those micro-level struggles we just talked about.
They tie the whole collection together.
They really do. They're grouped into themes of lost love, youthful celebration, and some very stark societal warnings. For instance, in the poem Lips, there's this primordial, vibrant image of a great ape swinging on a crescent moon in the pitch blackness, hooting apishly into the void. It's a pure, unadulterated celebration of life and energy.
But it doesn't stay celebratory for long.
No, the poems take a turn and pivot into some very heavy, very modern realities.
The poetry section zooms out considerably to look at global, societal shadows rather than just individual ones.
And right here, I think it's important to make a quick note to you, the listener. In this section, Lindstrath doesn't shy away from some heavily politically and socially charged waters. He writes about the U.S. war in Afghanistan, describing soldiers firing at unseen enemies in the Hindu Kush Mountains.
He covers a lot of ground.
He writes about the devastating COVID-19 mass graves in places like Brazil and India in a poem called Virus. He explores the looming, indifferent threat of artificial intelligence in a poem called Machina. And he touches on the tragic history of Native American boarding schools, specifically referencing the late activist Dennis Banks.
These are very weighty topics.
Very weighty. And just as a quick heads up to you listening, our goal today is just to explore how these themes function as literary devices in the book. We aren't taking any political stances ourselves or endorsing the viewpoints presented. We are just looking at how the author uses these global events to build his overarching themes.
Exactly. And when looking at them as literary elements, their function within the whole collection becomes very clear. The mass graves described in the Virus poem directly mirror the sudden, indifferent death of the graduate students in the Belizean jungle.
It's the same indifference.
Right. And the cold, unfeeling code of the AI in Machina mirrors the uncaring nature of the Florida swamp. Lindstrath is showing us that these massive global crises are really just the exact same blue shadows, just written large across society.
So what does this all mean? We've gone through all this tragedy, this deep isolation, these looming shadows of death. Here's where it gets really interesting, because you have to wonder, is there any hope in this collection? Is it all just doom and gloom?
There is absolutely hope, and it brings us to a crucial philosophical climax. In the author's introduction, he explicitly connects his entire body of work to Albert Camus's famous essay, The Myth of Sisyphus.
Sisyphus with the boulder.
Exactly. If you aren't familiar, Sisyphus was the figure in Greek mythology condemned to roll a massive boulder up a hill for eternity, only to watch it roll back down every time he neared the top. The core belief underlying all of Lindstroth's stories and poems is that life is exactly that boulder.
We just have to keep pushing it.
We must push it up the mountain, and often it can feel like it's to no avail. The young hunter fighting the terrifying boar in the swamp, the matador facing the massive bull in the ring, the Mexican flower seller hoping against hope that his son returns, the Oxford boyfriend trying desperately to heal his broken partner.
They are all pushing their own heavy boulders.
They are. Yet, Camus argued, and Lindstroth reflects deeply in this work, that we must imagine Sisyphus happy.
Imagine him happy. How do you find happiness in a pointless struggle?
Because there is a profound, resilient joy in the pushing itself. The overcoming of the struggle, the sheer act of refusing to surrender to the absurd indifference of the universe, is where we find our actual meaning.
So the boulder isn't the point.
The tragedy isn't the boulder. The triumph is the fact that we keep putting our hands on this stone and pushing.
That is such a powerful way to tie it all together. We've traveled today from the terrifying, freezing Florida swamps where a young man faces down a wild boar to the humid, chaotic Mayan jungles of Belize. We've stood in a vibrant Spanish bull ring to witness a fatal clash of human hubris and animal terror, and we've sat on an Oxford balcony littered with tiny bones.
It's been quite a journey.
The unifying thread across all these incredibly eclectic settings is that every single character is alone. They are all fighting their own specific battle, swimming in the blue shadows of their own mortality.
And this raises an important question for all of us. Remember, knowledge is most valuable when it is deeply understood and then applied to your own life. These stories aren't just fascinating anecdotes to listen to on a commute.
Right, they ask more of us.
They ask us to look closely at our own struggles. They ask us not to view our hardships as unique curses isolated from the rest of the world, but as our shared human condition. We are all pushing the boulder.
I couldn't agree more. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive today. Before you go, we want to leave you with one final lingering thought to mull over. The title of the book suggests that the blue shadows of death and hardship are always hidden, yet they are always there. But think about this. If we are all constantly swimming in those shadows, does pretending they don't exist actually help us float? Or is it only by finally looking down into the dark water that we actually learn how to swim?